Welcome to The Abundance Project, the podcast where together we hack the game of life to manifest more abundance in business, love, money, and freedom. I'm your host, Tess, a six-figure business owner, a fiance, a hot dog mom, and a woman who, just like you, is navigating the journey of compounding abundance every single day. In each episode, we'll dive into practical strategies, inspiring stories, and actionable tips to help you unlock your fullest potential and create a life overflowing with abundance. Whether you're looking to elevate your career, deepen your relationships, achieve financial freedom, or simply find more joy and fulfillment, you're in the right place. So join me on this adventure as we learn, grow, and manifest abundance together. Let's get into the episode. I am so freaking excited. I feel like everything just aligned and now we get to have such a cool conversation. But today we have Leo on. Now, I never do enough credit as what you could do introducing yourself. So I'm not even going to try. I would love for you to share your story. Tell us who you are. Tell us what you do. Go on the tangents, go on the U-turns. I invite you to do it all. And I just want to know everything.
Yay, amazing. Hi, everyone, and thanks for having me on. My name is Leo Blanke. I'm a relationship therapist and intimacy coach, and I work with singles and couples and supporting them to create thriving relationships and deepen their connections and essentially remove all the little blockages that can be in the way of creating incredible relationships. And I think the reason why I'm here today and why I've gone on this path is because for most of my life, I've struggled with connection. For most of my life, I've struggled with the sense of belonging. I was bullied in high school. I was always the girl that was the outstander. I never found groups that I felt like I could fit in. And as soon as I finished high school, I moved to Australia for, at the time, I thought the love of my life. So I moved halfway across the world. I'm originally from Germany to live with this man, and I ended up being in a 6-figure relationship with this partner. And throughout this relationship, I started getting more and more depressed. And it started becoming quite sad, and I didn't really know like what else to do here because I didn't have the tools and practices available to change or shift anything to change that relationship. And the truth is that most mediocre relationships are in a very similar place. They get into relationship, they're in this beautiful honeymoon phase, and it's like, yeah, this is fun, this is games, let's do this. And then they get into the conflict phase and they don't know how to move through the conflict phase. And this is where my ex-partner and I got stuck. We had a relationship that was based on mainly physical like appearance and attraction, and a couple of things that we had in common was going to the gym. So we hit it hard at the gym and we were super physically attracted to each other. So we had great sex until I got off the pill, and it changed the way that I actually was attracted to people. And I was going to say that in itself could be a whole nother podcast as well, talking about the pill and hormones. But essentially it created a place of going from having sex with my beloved sometimes 2-3 times a day to not desiring him at all anymore and not actually understanding why. So the relationship, I was already at an all-time low mental health-wise. And then our sex life and our intimacy just completely crashed. And it created a really big challenge in our relationship because neither of us was great at communicating, and I didn't have any boundaries. So we ended up in emotionally abusive situations. We ended up in situations where he physically crossed my boundaries and I didn't have the tools to say no. So essentially I was physically assaulted in my own relationship with my beloved because I didn't have the tools to know better until I found the strength to actually end that relationship. And that set me on a path of learning and expanding, going deep into self-development, and just learning everything I possibly could about myself. And I started noticing so many of my friends started coming to me that were in relationship and asking me about relationship advice, asking me about dating advice, asking me about how to communicate with the masculine. And at this point in time, I was still the woman that would also emasculate men. I was still the woman that would think I know it all, blah, blah, blah. But I still didn't have any healthy relationship with masculine at that point either. And it wasn't until I fell into a situation about 4 years ago or so now, where I moved onto a land in a Tantra community, and I had no idea about what Tantra was at this time. But I learned so much being in this space and being surrounded by people that were so open about sexuality, which was a big part of my life that I had been quite close to. I had a really good sexual connection with my long-term partner. However, outside of that, and I'm curious if you resonate with this, around what is sex education, or what was sex education? Like, I remember for me, my mom asked me back in the day when I started seeing my first like serious boyfriend, she's like, so did you guys do the deed? Did you use a condom? Was it good? Okay, cool. Thumbs up. And the conversation was over. And that was the sex education.
That's so
And
interesting. You keep going. I'm like, there's so many points I want to jump in, but
yeah. and that just set me on this, like, and then I ended up in this Tantra community where everyone was so open about their sexuality, so open about how they related with people, so open about, you know, how they communicated. And for about the year and a half that I lived in this house, every morning I sat on the porch with one of the people that lived there, and I just like did a deep dive in asking questions and bringing curiosity over judgment into these conversations, and learning for 2 hours every single day. And at this point, I already knew lots of things about relating and relationships, but that just opened up a whole nother world. And then that opened up the world for me to go into Tantra and sacred sexuality and deeper intimacy. And that just opened doors that I never knew even existed. And that is the work that I bring to the world. I work with people that are potentially in mediocre relationships, but they know, or they have a deep sense or feeling that there's something more available to them, and they want to explore that. They're not at a state of massively deep conflict and, you know, at the edge of breaking up. No, I work with couples and people that are pretty good in themselves, but they know that there is more out there. They know that there is more available. They know that there is more intimacy that goes beyond fucking and that goes beyond just sex. And that's what I'm here for. And beyond that mediocre, there is magic that's available. And I want to lead couples and singles on that path of magic so they can experience that in their relationships.
that's so incredibly beautiful. And I feel like in fitting with the theme of the Abundance Project, it's so often like we think abundance and we think money, and we think like how everyone is normally living in like a pretty mediocre relationship with money and a lack mentality and a scarce mentality. But how much is that mirrored in people's relationships where they just like, because the quote unquote norm is mediocre, people settle for that because they haven't seen to believe like what else is available to them and what else is possible for them. And like, I've been on my own personal journey, and to share a little bit, because I know that it will take the conversation in so many different ways. But my partner and I, fiance now, we got together maybe like 6 years ago, and I was very much the same. I was very in my masculine, but like my sex was like okay, but I didn't figure out how to orgasm even with myself until maybe like 18 months ago. And that was coupled with, I had a very open relationship with my mum where we spoke about sex a lot. So even with that like vulnerability, I still had never had that experience. So it's so interesting to see that no matter what potentially your background is, no matter what you've grown up with, no matter what you've been role modeled, like when you do get that sense of, but there's more available, that there actually is an abundance of love and intimacy and connection, which I just think is so incredible.
Yes. Yeah, you're making such a great point there around, around the piece around, we don't know it's available until someone shows us a path. And it's like that in all areas of life. And for me, it's like shown up massively, especially in relationships, because my parents I'm very lucky and fortunate that my parents actually are still in relationship, and they are still together, and they actually do have quite a loving relationship. However, it is a mediocre relationship. And it, you know, like having seen them now, they're in their mum's in her late 50s, dad is in his early 60s, and seeing them play out the same patterns over and over and over again, and not knowing how to actually communicate differently to create a different outcome. I just put a post up on Facebook this morning saying dysfunctional relationships is where you get into a conflict, or you bring a problem to the table, and that turns into conflict, and then that creates a bigger problem. Whereas if I bring a problem into a relationship where I have a divine partner and where we're open to work through stuff, then that creates a different outcome and a solution. So that's one of the easiest way to figure out, am I in a great functional divine relationship, or am I in a dysfunctional relationship? Where are my conversations leading us? Are they creating bigger problems, or are they creating changing patterns and solutions to the problems?
I feel like that's where a lot of people potentially limit themselves and what's available to them, because they think that conflict means bad relationship. They think that contrast means bad relationship. And if I'm in a good relationship, an abundant relationship, then we're just never going to fight, which is so not the reality. But the difference, and the way that I see the difference, is very much, let's use the term bad relationship, but take it with a grain of salt. Bad relationship is you and me against each other in conflict, and good relationship is you and me against the problem. Yes. And let's work through that. And I would love for you to expand on what you see let's use the terminology good, just for lack of better word coming to my brain right now. But what is an abundant relationship for you? How would you describe that?
Great. I actually want to add on to the analogy that you just used, because exactly that analogy, I actually utilize that at my workshops when I teach.
Love.
It's and the way that I describe this is I create a triangle, and I say in this triangle, we have you, we have me, and then at the top we have us. And most relationships, the mediocre relationships, or often the dysfunctional relationships, they see the you and the me, and they see relationships like a soccer game. And then they see the us as a goal that they have to win. So look at it like a soccer game, and they're playing a ball back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And they're like, I want to win, I want to win, I want to win, I want to win. And the more one person wants to win, the less the other person's considered, and the more despair it actually creates, until one person wins, and that means the other person has to lose, right? So someone else is always going to end up feeling like shit in this relationship. And that is a dysfunctional relationship. And the way that I describe this, when we get into a relationship with another, it takes time to understand each other. It takes time to understand how we can best show up in ourselves, for ourselves in this relationship, and for the other person. And the way that I describe this is, imagine two people coming together and learning how to dance a new dance together. But they're coming together, and one person's a salsa dancer and the other person's a tango dancer, and they have different steps, and it doesn't quite work. So they're trying to stay with their own steps. And if they were to stay with their own steps, they're just going to play the soccer game. But instead of staying with their own steps, they're going, you're doing this differently. Where can we find a new way that's not my way and that's not your way, but that's the us way? How can we find the dance of this relationship? So the key points to a successful divine union, that's what I would call it. Whether you call it a healthy relationship, a thriving relationship, I do bring a spiritual aspect into it as well that I really love, which if I look at it as sacred union, essentially is bringing deep love and compassion to the relationship, and deep presence and deep understanding. And that takes time and it takes effort. And I think because we live in such a fast-paced world, time and presence is two of the things that most of society lacks. But it is what a conscious relationship asks for the most. So if I desire to create a divine union with another, I must create the time and the space to really deeply connect, to really deeply understand. I must put aside time to find the ways that will work for us. Like every single thing that I learn, I don't just go and read a book and I know it all. Yeah, I can't write a book about myself and hand that to my partner and be like, hey, here's all the things you have to learn about me. We're going to be perfect. No. And for you, you are in a relationship that's 6+ years going on. And I have been in a relationship that has been 6+ years going on. And I see my parents that have been in a relationship for 30, 40 years now. The truth is that conflict is not something that doesn't happen anymore. We just get to learn better ways how to move through it. So rather than staying stuck in it, we move through it quicker and we repair quicker. So learning how to repair is one of the best ways that we can learn in relationship to create that thriving relationship.
In keeping with that pathway, what would your number one piece of advice be to someone to learn how to repair conflict better, to learn how to repair contrast more efficiently?
Yeah. The number one thing is I teach this exact thing. I have a framework that's called the Conscious Conversation Framework, and I teach that at my Return to Love immersion. It probably takes me about an hour and a half to teach it and to demonstrate and to take people through it. But I think the number one thing is to recognize that we can't resolve conflict in the moment of conflict. When we have two dysregulated nervous systems coming together, it's like two fires meeting each other and it will just create a bigger fire. And we're not going to resolve anything in that moment. We must actually disconnect in that moment and take one another away from one another and regulate our own nervous system to then come back together. And when we do come back together, checking in with each other, are we available? Do we have the capacity to work through this now? Are we regulated enough to work through this now? And learning, this is why it's so important to spend time with each other to learn about our different styles of communication, our different fight styles. We all have different responses. If I look at trauma responses, which is generally the responses that come up in big despair or big conflict, we drop into our automatic trauma response, which could be fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And if I understand my own trauma response and I understand my partner's trauma response, and we both have an awareness around how I can support myself to come back into regulation from dysregulation, and the same for my partner and for each other, that's most of the problems are already gone here. But the issue is that most people have no idea about their own trauma responses. A lot of people don't even know what the trauma responses are, the freeze, fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And if you're listening and you're like, I don't know what they're talking about, I invite you to just jump onto Google and type in window of tolerance, and we'll just give you a really quick little example to have a little look at what we're talking about. But just understanding that will give us an understanding how I can bring myself from dysregulation back into regulation, and how I can support my partner to come out of dysregulation into regulation, and being able to identify when my partner starts to get to the edge of their window of tolerance. Can I pause there rather than push them further so that I push them over the edge? And I think most people in relationship, they keep going and they push their partner over the window of tolerance, and that's where I create more despair. But if I notice and I'm aware that, oh, hang on, I'm starting to notice my partner is starting to feel dysregulated, rather than continuing to keep going, at this point in time, can I pause and can I check in and go, hey, babe, I'm noticing X, Y, Z. Is there anything I can do to support you right now? It completely shifts and changes how I communicate and how I interact in that interaction then.
What I'm hearing mostly through this conversation is the importance of your own relationship to yourself, your own self-awareness first, because you, excuse my French, but you are going to have fuck all chance of having a conscious conversation if you yourself can't even identify your own window of tolerance, your own patterns, your own behaviors, your own if you even want to go down the route of looking at where your relationship trauma comes from, where your attachment style comes from, like all of these different things, learning about them for yourself, I have found the biggest shifter to my own relationship is learning myself. Like I was such an anxious attachment, and I would need, and Brody obviously, because like opposites attract, Brody was very much a avoidant. And I would come in being like, we need to fix it right now because I'm so uncomfortable and I can't hold like the dysregulation of it not being okay. So I'm gonna go people pleaser and I'm gonna do anything I can just so like it's fixed. But Brody would be like, absolutely fuck off and leave me alone because I don't want to deal with this right now. Like I remember one of the biggest conflicts we had, it made me really step back and question myself, like, oh, is it actually more important in this moment right now that I am right and that I am fixing it? Or is it more important the long-term health of our relationship, the long-term stance of our intimacy? And I think that can be the hardest part for someone to get into. It's like, actually, you almost have to be the most selfless that you can in that moment to be the most selfish for you and your relationship in the long term.
Yeah. Yeah. Such a great pattern that you're bringing into this. Like the awareness piece of self
Oh.
is like key to any, if I want a conscious relationship, like I said, we're talking about mediocre relationships. We're talking about relationships beyond mediocre relationships. Because some people are just happy to just like get stuck into the patterns and they just want to keep doing that. But same thing, they're happy because they don't know there's something else available out there. And so, yes, the first key is the self-awareness piece. Like I have over the past 5 years, probably since my long-term relationship ended with my long-term partner, I have taken a lot of time for myself and to myself. And same as you, past massively anxiously attached person, but taking the time to myself and choosing celibacy over a year, like meaning that I didn't relate or have sex with anyone. I think about a year and a half I chose celibacy for, has taught me the deepest things about my own stuff, self-awareness work, like doing all of that. If I have that as a foundation and I can bring that to a relationship, that's the biggest gift I can give to a relationship. Or if I'm already in a relationship, it's the biggest gift that I can give to myself and the relationship as we start entering into a more conscious space of the relationship. And the second piece that you spoke to, which is so like crucial, especially when it comes to conflict resolution, is the attachment tendency. Like, what is my tendency? To have a tendency to be anxiously, avoidantly, or disorganizedly attached? And I present this at my immersion events in quite a funny way, and people just have like complete mind-blowing experiences because I divide the room into where people are, whether they're more anxiously or more avoidant, and I take them through a somatic process to feel into their body of what their tendencies are and tune in with themselves to have some self-reflection time. And then I present to them like how that plays out and how that shows up. And the whole room is, regulated in a state of like receiving and learning. So they see themselves at the extreme playing out the anxious or at the extreme playing out the avoidant, and the room just sits there going like, oh my god, yeah, that's me. Oh my god, yeah, I've done that. Oh my god, yeah. And then I give them the tools, or I show them and share with them, this is what you need to do for yourself to support yourself as an anxiously attached or as an avoidantly attached person. And these are the things that you can do for the other person to support the other person. And when I have those tools, it shifts and changes because I no longer get into the unconscious pattern of one person being avoidant, one person being anxious, come into the relationship going, hey, I want this. And the person that goes avoidant goes, oh, fuck that, I'm out. And that is the relationship breakdown, what happens so many times because people just simply don't have the tools or the awareness or the understanding. And I always say this, I say, you don't need to go to therapy because there's anything wrong with you. But we all need to go to therapy because we need someone that can allow us to give us some space to be heard, to be seen, and to work through our own stuff and give us a wider level of awareness and give us an outside perspective.
Mm.
And I actually want to add another piece to that because it's something that is playing out massively, that has massively played out in my own life over the past year, and actually almost broke my own relationship apart. And I'm seeing it at the moment playing out on the internet with friends, which is where women have a relationship problem and they go to their female friends to complain about their problems. And what do the female friends do? They go, oh, darling, it's so true. He's fucked. He needs to do more work. You're right. You're doing everything right. No, I love you. You're okay. So then the female goes, oh, yeah, it's all him. It's all his fault. And then she brings that back to the relationship. And the thing that's already a problem is creating a bigger problem. Whereas what should happen instead is the female that's struggling with things should bring those things to a therapist, a mentor, a coach, someone that has a deeper understanding and someone that has a neutral perspective and someone that's not on her side or on his side, because it could go both ways. Or maybe she could go to a male friend that also has a neutral perspective and that knows both people well and doesn't have a nuanced view on either of the people.
That's so huge. It reminds me of a conversation I've been having with one of my clients who basically was like, I don't know if this is a relationship for me anymore. And I was like, I don't think that's true. And all of the different things about like, I wish he would do this. I wish he would do that. And I was like, okay, well, what's your role in that? What's your part in that? What's your responsibility? And they had a conversation and she said something to him and he was like, yeah, but you won't even let me be more masculine. And she laughed because that's exactly what I said to her. It's like, actually, it is you. And that brings me into a point and a question and a conversation that I want to have, because I feel like, especially my audience, there are a lot of women who are interested in personal development and they have a man that potentially isn't, and they project that like, if he's not doing the quote unquote work, then I'm going to outgrow him and he's not going to be enough for me. Like, how does a woman who wants to create a more conscious relationship do that without forcing her man to learn about all of these things when he's maybe just not fucking interested? He loves you and he wants a better relationship, but like, is that possible? Like, what's your perception?
Yeah, great question. I think there is so many different pieces playing at the same time, and it really depends on the individual couple and on the individual woman and on the individual man. There's a couple of pieces that I just want to speak into with that specifically. So firstly, for the women that are listening, and I know a lot of your audience are women, and a lot of the women that are listening, they probably have, they have quite a drive. And a lot of the women are probably entrepreneurs as well. And the biggest piece that I want to speak into is that if you want him to do something, it becomes the biggest piece is around how do I communicate that? So if I communicate that from my masculine and I belittle him, or if he doesn't do that, I make him wrong for it, or I shame him, or, coming from this kind of place, he's not going to do that. He's going to run because you're not creating a safe space for him. So the biggest piece around it is how do I invite him into that? So women have a desire to be seen and heard. Men have a desire to be appreciated and respected. So how can I continuously appreciate and respect him? And there was another piece that spoke into that you shared earlier that is relevant for this as well, is that underneath every complaint, there's a deeper desire. So don't complain that he's not doing the work. Share the desire that you have. What would it give the relationship if you were to do X, Y, Z? So in example, I used to run a couples event called Temple of Devotion, which was a 3 or 4 hour evening for couples to dive deeper into intimacy and learn non-sexual ways of expanding pleasure. And all of the women were like, oh my God, I want to go, but how do I get my man to go? Like, you don't say, come to this or this relationship ends. No. You don't say, we must go to this or there's going to be a problem. No. You're going to come to me and say, hey, babe, there's this thing I'm really curious about, and I really love our connection. I really love our intimacy, and I just adore it when we create time and space for that. And I saw this event and I'm so curious, and I'm wondering, like, would you want to have a look at it with me? I feel like it could bring us even closer than we already are. Yeah. So I show him, what is this going to give us? What is this going to provide the relationship? Yeah. And I ask him without the expectation. It's okay for him to say no. Yeah. And that's a big one. Like taking the expectation piece out. If I come to a conversation and I already have the expectation that it must be a yes, or it must have XYZ outcome, I'm already leading the disappointment. I'm leading with an energetics that comes with an obligation. And whether you can feel it or you can't feel it, the person that you're communicating to, they can feel it.
Absolutely.
Whether it's consciously or unconsciously, it's in the energetics, so it can be felt. So coming back to, how do I get my man to do the work if I'm doing the work and I feel like he's not doing enough work? This is such a common one.
So common.
Oh. There's another piece that I want to add to this, which I think is heavily overlooked, which is, I think so many women have these tick boxes of what it means. Well, firstly, they have these tick boxes of like what kind of man they want to date. He has to be tall, he has to be handsome, he has to be this, he has to go to the gym, he has to and it becomes like this long wish list. But they're all just wishes, they're not non-negotiables. And rather than having a list with a million things on them, can you just like look at that list and go, what's actually non-negotiable for me and what's actually really important to me? Because is it more important for me to date someone that can communicate really well and move through conflict easily and that can allow me to feel seen, heard, valued, make me feel safe? Or is it more important to me to date someone that has a 200-kilo deadlift at the gym and looks good in the mirror? Because I've dated that man and no, he cannot resolve conflict. Some probably do, but my man that did that could not. So reflecting on that and the piece around doing the work and the tick list, I remember one specific friend. She's in her mid-40s now. She's still single. There's a reason for that. There's always a reason why people are in places that they're in. And she has this list of all of these things that a man has to tick that he's doing the work. And for the women that are listening, I just invite you to feel into, what are the things that you're telling yourself that your man has to do that he's doing the work? Because for me, he doesn't have to be into the same things as me. For me, it's more important that he has the ability to communicate. He doesn't have to read the book attached. But if he understands that he has a tendency to be avoidant, as long as he can communicate to me when he needs space, that's okay. Yeah. So, and I think in a lot of ways, we have these ideas that where we think that people are only doing the work if they do X, Y, Z. If they've read the book attached, if they're going to this workshop, if they've done NLP, if they've if they're listening to this podcast. But there is so many different ways in the world that people can do the work that aren't labeled as doing the work. So an example, a lover of mine used to be a Krav Maga instructor for years and years, and he used to coach Krav Maga to people. In Krav Maga, they learn how to communicate. In Krav Maga, they learn boundaries and how to say no really efficiently. In Krav Maga, they learn personal space. In Krav Maga, they learn deep energetic attunement to the environment around them. In Krav Maga, they learn how to defend themselves. In Krav Maga, they learn how to move their body with another towards and away from them. They learn how to read body language. Krav Maga isn't doing the work though, is it? But it is, just in a very different way. So rather than, this is the same thing around men need to feel respected and appreciated. Have a look at your man and your man's life, and rather than seeing where he's not doing the work, can you actually recognize where he is doing the work? Huge. Can you look at the areas of his life where you can appreciate him and where you can respect him for what he's doing and how he's showing up. Because is it more important to you that he goes and does a training that teaches him XYZ, or is it more important to you that he moves through the world respecting women and, you know, being a gentleman? And the person that's standing in front of you shows you exactly who they are in this moment in time. But it also shows you some of their past pains and traumas that keep playing out in this lifetime, in this moment, because that is how the human works. Our past and our pains are carried with us to this moment until we look at them and resolve them. But if I shame them for the pains, and I shame them for the problems, and I shame them for the things that are creating problems, they're just going to keep running away from that more. And this is for any human being, whether this is a friend, whether this is a partner. So rather than going like, why are you doing that? That's not supporting us to create deeper understanding. Like bringing softness to them, being, hey, babe, I noticed this. What's going on for you here? Hey, babe, I noticed when I wanted to have a conversation about this, I noticed that you didn't feel very open. Do you want to share what's going on for you with that? I want to understand you. But if I go, why aren't you listening? Do you think they will listen more? No.
100%. The way you communicate is literally everything.
Yeah. And this is why like communication is such a key piece of my work, because the way that I deliver my message creates the outcome, because the masculine responds to the feminine. So if I learn how to communicate in a respectful and appreciative and loving and compassionate way with clean energetics and no expectation, my man will meet me.
1000%. I want to I don't know what happened. I want to add some like not analogies, but my experiences to that, because I remember having a conversation a couple of years ago with my mentor being like, I'm gonna outgrow Birdie, like I'm doing all this stuff. And I remember this one conversation we had. I tend to think men can be very conscious, especially like I think sometimes the personal development world that as women we fall into, and we get this bit of like superiority complex, and then our ego re-evolves and it becomes like there's like a whole journey in that, right? But I remember having this conversation with Brody at one point where he came to me and he said something. He's a very deep thinker and he drives a lot for work, like to and from job sites. So he's constantly listening to podcasts, or he's thinking and he's contemplating. And he said something to me and I literally turned around and I was like, I paid 40 grand to get to that realization and you just motherfucking thought about it and landed there. And I was like, okay.
What was the realization?
I don't even remember anymore. Okay. He was just so like thoughtful in that moment, and it made me realize like, oh shit, like if I outgrow him, yeah, that might happen, but I know that the masculine is going to want to keep up if I give him the opportunity to. And I think that's the other piece, right? It's like women, we think we want this deep, intimate relationship. We think we want to be in our feminine, but that is so deeply terrifying and vulnerable that we're actually going to just like create a scenario where we get close and then we eject and we go and find the next relationship, and we never break that glass ceiling because of how vulnerable it is to be truly taken care of and provided and protected by your masculine man. Like we get so scared of the deep intimacy that comes with that. Like going back to the anxious avoidant, like that dynamic creates such chemistry and good sex, but that's like kind of comfortable. What about good intimacy and good sex when it's coming from a deeply vulnerable place? Like that is so terrifying. I remember even like I grew up dancing. Like, I've danced my whole life. I'm very comfortable dancing on stage.
Uh-huh.
I remember the first time I danced one-to-one for Brody, I literally cried, left, shut the door, like, was like, okay, I need a second. And I tried again. It was so dysregulating. It's not funny because that intimacy is like actually terrifying, right?
Yes. Yeah. The simplest thing you can do with your partner to create deeper intimacy is to just sit for 5 minutes and eye gaze with no words exchanged. And some people go, oh, that's awkward. Or some people go, that's not, how's that intimate? But just, if you've never eye gazed with your partner, just set a timer, sit opposite from each other, and just eye gaze into each other's eyes for 5 minutes and see all the stuff that arises. But the thing with it is stay present. Can you breathe into your body, look at your partner, and stay deeply present with what arises? And whatever arises, can you invite it in, and can you allow it to move through you rather than pushing it down? Because it could be easy to disassociate. It could be easy to try and just push it away, to just like get through time. But can you just allow it to come through? And that could be a deeply healing experience where you might end up bawling your eyes out, but it will allow you space to feel so deeply seen to depth that your partner may have never seen you before, and for you to see your partner at a depth that you may have never seen him or her before. Yeah.
What does that feel like to you? What does like being more intimate than the normal relationship feel like to you? What is like taking it back to abundance? What does that abundance in love feel like to you?
It's like opening a cosmic portal where you completely forget where you are. It's like words cannot even describe like the feelings and the things that can move through me when my lover and I are in this space of deep presence with each other, and especially coming to the place of like, you know, what does the abundance of love feel like? I think the biggest piece to get to that is the deep presence and the ability to forget the rest of the world around us. When I'm so deeply present with my beloved in front of me and with him or with her, if you're listening and you're a man, or you're a woman, you like women, the him, her can get confusing sometimes, or with them. I'm just like in my mind, I'm taking myself to those places right now. And I'm just like, I'm trying to like find the words for like the feelings that are evolving through my body. Like I remember this moment, my lover and I, we were away for weekends, and I've got a really beautiful van set up, and we had the back doors open, and we were just like sitting in each other's arms. Or like, I think we were just sitting opposite each other, and we had our foreheads touching, and we were just moving back and forth with our foreheads. And we just started like getting into this like energetic, orgasmic portal, and his body was just like moving together with mine. And at one point he just started jittering, and he's like, what is this? Because it felt so surreal. Like the energetics of what was created between us felt so out of this world. It didn't feel like it existed in this universe. And that's the kind of intimacy that I desire to have all the time. And that's not possible all the time. But if I have that as like, if I know that's available, I can keep moving towards that. And most times when we get to that, it actually breaks that ceiling and creates a deeper depth. It creates deeper intimacy. So for me, the abundance of love is the thought about keeping that portal open at all times, and believing that it's possible, and not expecting for it to happen, but being open to the possibility at all and any time.
That like the piece about being open to it when we go into something with, because the thing is, right, whether people know that are listening or not, we'll re-explain. Your unconscious never wants to be a liar. Like, your unconscious never wants to be proven wrong. So if you've already unconsciously decided on the outcome of something, you're going to do everything you can unconsciously to make that the outcome. So when you come in with open expectations, that can feel very vulnerable, but oh my goodness, what you get met with in that, what is available to you in that is just, I love so much that I could see you picturing yourself in those scenarios, and it really is actually hard to describe them unless you've experienced it. But even just energetically, like, people, I can certainly feel into the emotion that you were feeling, and the space that you were feeling. Like, just imagine what that would feel like when you are in that relationship. Like, it's one thing to be like, okay, cool, more is available to me, but when you experience it, oh, it's almost like addictive, but not in a shadowy way. Like, you're like, oh my God, I am never settling for less again. Like, this is available. Like, give me more of that.
Yes, yes. And that is so true. Like, oh my God, this is available. I don't want less than that anymore. And this is the, like, yeah, this is the new pathway of, like, in the past, and I think from what you shared, similar, like, in the past, we've both had mediocre relationships, but once we've found this new pathway, it's like, oh, okay, no, cool. I'm not going back. And that is literally the experience of life itself. I only move forwards in life. I don't go back. I go back in thoughts, and I go back in experiences, and I go back in being triggered, but I don't go back in time physically. I constantly keep moving forward. So if I keep that same mentality on, relationships as well, and intimacy as well, like, I'm constantly looking, this is for me personally, like, one of my biggest values is growth over comfort at all times. So it's like, intimacy is something that I'm so passionate about, because I love bringing, like, the tantric aspects to sexuality and make sexuality sacred, rather than getting stuck in patterns, because most partners are stuck in patterns of what intimacy looks like, and then that gets boring, and then intimacy stops. Or then it's just like, oh, we're doing this again. And then it creates resentment. It creates all of these barriers to intimacy until intimacy doesn't happen again, which is exactly what happened for me back in the day in my 6-year relationship, because I didn't have the tools to clean up the things that were in the way. So, like, the conversations and the conflicts that need to happen, if I don't clean that stuff up, it starts becoming the way of intimacy as well. And with the thought around growth over comfort is, I consistently desire to grow in all areas of my life. I desire to grow my business into the next phase, into the next stage, into the next abundance. I desire to grow myself into the next stage, learning more about myself, deepening myself, recognizing that the self-awareness journey, there is no end to it. Doing the work, there is no end to it. And this is, like, I think one of the misconceptions, like, with especially some women that I've recognized in their 40s that are single, they're like, why haven't I done enough work? Like, why can't I find this partner yet? It's like, well, with that attitude, you won't. And recognizing that the deepest healing still is yet to come in relationship, because I can go and do all of this healing work on myself. I can become very aware of all of my patterns. I can become very aware of my traumas, my woundings, all of the things. However, in relationship, it will trigger all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And that gives me a deeper opportunity to heal. It gives me a deeper opportunity to step forward. And, like, this is like what we spoke to earlier, where we said the honeymoon phase, the conflict phase. Lots of people stop in the conflict phase and they go, this is too hard and I'm just going to quit. I'm going to go find something else. It's going to feel easier. And they keep repeating the same pattern over and over and over again. And it works because we live in such a fast-paced society where dating is so recyclable. So then all of our patterns are just being recycled over and over and over again, rather than actually being healed. So the magic that's available beyond mediocre is available beyond the conflict phase, when I learn how to move through the conflict phase rather than staying stuck in it, which is all the things that we talked about today around self-awareness, taking self-responsibilities, becoming aware of my avoidant or my anxious or my disorganized attachment tendencies, how I can support them, how I can support my partners, my own trauma responses, my partner's trauma responses, recognizing when I'm starting to feel dysregulated, taking self-responsibility to regulate myself, understanding how I can support my partner, changing the way that I communicate, removing the expectation from X, Y, Z to happen. Otherwise, this will happen. And not creating those same patterns. So shifting and changing and breaking the cycle that we've played out our entire life to create something new and different.
That was so beautiful.
And that's a conscious choice. And that choice and that process isn't always easy, but I always say it is so worth it.
1,000%. It's that analogy of like, you can choose easy now and hard later, or you can choose hard now, easy later.
Yes. And I actually love to ask you, because you've been with your current partner for 6 years, 7 years?
Almost 6, yeah.
Almost 6 years. What are the top 3 things that you would share with couples or for people that you're like, these are the top 3 things that everybody should know for relationships?
Oh, that's so... Okay, top 3 things. Number 1, I think for my audience and for the type of women that I attract, like, the strongest woman can be independent, but chooses to ask for help anyways and asks to be supported anyways. Because I think like the whole independent boss babe movement has kind of like swung to the extreme and fucked us a little. Like, actually the strongest woman can do it alone, but doesn't have to. I think finding the depth of relationship that you can have with yourself is going to be mirrored in the relationship that you can have with your partner. The more I allow myself to love myself, the more I allow myself to receive love from him. Because if I'm not being myself and he's loving me, it's going to bounce off. It's not going to touch the sides because I'm not actually being validated and loved for who I am. So the more I can love myself and be authentic, the more I'm going to receive love in my relationship. And like, I use this analogy for everything, but it always comes up in relationship. Anytime I decide I want a rainbow, there's going to be a storm to get me there. If I decide I want more intimacy, if shit blows up 2 seconds later, it's not a coincidence. It is definitely a coincidence, and it is leading where you want to go.
I love that. If I want the rainbow, there's going to be a storm as well. Yeah, I love those.
Perfect.
It's so true, the piece around, and I think, yeah, especially like I feel you so deeply with this, with the boss bitch culture, not the boss girl culture.
Yeah.
And same thing, that used to be me. I used to just go hard, go home, I can do it all, leave me alone. But I'm not able to actually attract a partner from this place. I'm not able to attract the kind of partner from this place that I desire to have in my life. I must leave space for him to lead. If I desire a man to lead, I must leave space for him to lead. I must give him an opening into my world and an opening for him to actually take my hand and lead me. And I think with that piece, it's like, I might know better, or I might see where he's fucking up, but can I give him the chance to fuck it up anyway, rather than stepping in front and going, not like that, you're doing it wrong. Because that will disrespect him, and it will shut him down, and it will make him want to move the hell away from you. So the piece around like, maybe you do know better at times, or maybe you have a different way that you would do it, but can you soften into that, and can you just give him the opportunity to lead anyway? And can you give him the chance to fuck it up, and for that to be okay, and to appreciate him for giving it a go anyway. I think that's such a big one. And the other one, the second piece around like, yeah, the deeper relationship I have with myself, the deeper I can get into a relationship with another. Oh, I just had a really good point, and now it has You know when that happens?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll come back shortly. It's fine.
Perfect. It's so true though. Like, it's so, and self-love isn't just like the bubble baths and like the face masks and shit like that. Like loving yourself on the deepest layers, or even like take the orgasm, for example. And there's no fucking chance I was going to be able to figure out how to do that in relationship before I figured out how to do that by myself.
Yes.
Such a mirror.
I love that. I've just had a call with a new client the other day, and she asked me because she wants to dive deeply into feminine embodiment work, and she's been in my masculine most of her life, and she started to recognize that a lot of her problems are coming from her being so much in her masculine. She wants to drop deeper into her feminine and into sensuality and sacred sexuality and learn more about self-pleasure. And she called me the other day and she goes, should I invest in a crystal wand or some toys? And I was like, I don't know, where you at with self-pleasure at the moment? She's like, oh, I feel really uncomfortable about it. It's like, does it happen at the moment? She's like, oh, not a lot. And it's like, don't worry about buying any tools. You've got the best tool on hand. Like your hand is literally the best tool if you are starting to explore self-pleasure again for the first time in a long time, or you're deepening into that, because you've got sensation not just on your pussy, but also on your hand. So bringing like a big, like, you know, hard crystal wand is not the best tool to start with. This is your best tool to start with.
I love that. Everyone has homework now. Go and masturbate. It's the best place to manifest from, honestly. Like,
yes.
Huge. I have just adored this conversation. I feel like there's going to be so many, like, guys, I recommend that you go back and listen again and maybe like pause and take notes, because I feel like there's going to be so many tangible takeaways, but also just like expansion unconsciously, consciously, for you to see like there's actually so much more available to me. Here are some of the tools that I can start to use, and here is someone who has an event who I can go to. So I would love for you to tell us about your event. Where can people find you? Where can people work with you? Tell us all the details.
Amazing. Firstly, I absolutely love this conversation as well. And I knew from the moment that we met, I was like, oh yeah, we're going to have some great chats here.
Yeah.
So I've got a signature event called Return to Love, the Immersion, which is a full day event, which is currently happening on the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast. You can find the next event dates in the link in my bio, either on Facebook or Instagram. It's Leo Blanke on Facebook or Leo Blanke Official on Instagram. You're welcome to just send me a message as well. I always love hearing the biggest takeaways from podcasts. So if you have listened to this and you're like, oh my God, this really landed, or oh my God, I did the eye gaze with the partner and this is what happened, like, please, you know, send me or Tess a message. I would love to hear. And this workshop is also going to launch very soon as an online course. So I've had so many people all over the country and even from overseas reaching out to me. I actually have a couple flying up from Victoria for my next Sunny Coast event, which I'm super excited for. So it's coming up as an online course as well. So if that's something that you're curious about, feel free to send me a message and I'll put you on the email list for that. And then I've chatted a little bit during this call about intimacy and the magic and this place of like opening portals. And I have facilitated this as an in-person event 5 times, which was called the Temple of Devotion. And I have now launched that as an online event, as an online like self-paced course for you and your lover to explore the portals of pleasure that may be available for you, and explore some neo-tantric practices and guide you through the elements of touch to explore non-sexual intimacy that goes beyond fucking, essentially.
I love that.
And that's also available in the link in my bio, and there's currently at an intro offer price of $97. So feel free to jump in there and grab that for yourself if the intimacy side resonated for you.
1000%. Oh my God. I will pop those links in the show notes as well for everyone.
Amazing.
To just like easy click and find. I am an efficient gal, so I will make sure those are. But thank you so much for your time, guys. Make sure you like purchase the course, you do the work, you know what's available to you. So put some effort in and you will reap the rewards.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Yes.
Thank you so incredibly much for tuning into this week's episode of The Abundance Project. It means the world to me to have us create a community of like-minded people who are creating abundance in their own lives. So if you could share this episode with a friend, give us a 5-star rating, tag us when you share on your Instagram stories, it would mean the absolute world to me. Until next week, guys, go and find some magic in the micro moments. Love you.